Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to Touro Law Center for this speaker series that is sponsored by Touro and the Central Islip Advocacy Center for Youth and Families. I'm Sharon Pocock. I'm a professor here. This evening I'm substituting for Professor Post, who I think I mentioned is teaching in China right now. And this evening we have a wonderful speaker for the end of the year. Stacy Ezor is going to talk to us about advocating for your child with special needs. Ms. Ezor is particularly qualified to speak on this topic. She has a BA in psychology from Brandeis and an MA in psychology from Stony Brook University, and she has spent 10 years advocating for children with special needs. She's also a member of the Touro Law Center community. You've met her husband, Jonathan Ezor, who is the director of the Institute for Business Law and Technology here at Touro and is a professor in those areas. So I will turn the mic over to Stacy.
Thank you for coming out. The title of my talk is Joining the Team, Advocating for Your Child with Special Needs. And I think the reason I chose this title was that a lot of times parents don't see themselves as being equal members of the team. That they have the right to give input and speak up and make requests about their child's educational plan. And my hope is that this talk will motivate parents to really look at their role much differently and be stronger advocates. So that's really the goal for tonight, is really how can you be a stronger advocate for your child. As a parent, you're an expert in your child. It doesn't matter that everyone at the table might have all these letters after their names and advanced degrees and years of study. You've been studying your child since they were born. And you know them long term. You know how they were when they were little and how they've grown and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. Some of the evaluators might have met your child for an hour and you've known your child for years. So you have to have the confidence that if you feel something with your gut about your child, you're probably right. The first thing that I think is so important about becoming a parent advocate for your own child is getting information. The explosion of the internet and other technological resources has made information gathering so much easier for parents. It's no longer that you have to rely on the professional to tell you what your child, what the symptoms are or what your child has. You can go on the internet, you can gather information yourself. You can use listservs or internet groups to speak to people across the country or across the world about your child and gather information. So there's so many ways for parents to get information. The library is a wonderful resource. You can use interlibrary loan to get books. You don't have to rely on whether or not your own library has a book about any disability topic. You can get autism books, ADHD books, books about cerebral palsy, books about allergies, anything that you think might be difficult for your child or you might help with. The library probably has it in some library on Long Island. And I think it costs $0.25 to reserve these books. The librarians are very helpful. I'm sure they would be very helpful even if you don't know how to do it, that they can teach you how to do it. The internet, you can just type in on Google, which is one of these internet search engines, or Yahoo is another search engine, the name of your child's disability. And if you want it in Spanish, you just type in Español, or Spanish afterwards. You can get resources in any language telling you about your child's disability, so you can gather your own information. Parent newspapers, and I have an example of a Nassau version. These are available at supermarkets, libraries, schools. I would say almost every single month there's at least one article about special needs in here. There are ads for providers and different organizations, and it's free, and it's good to pick it up every month and see, oh, is there anything that pertains to my child in here? It's a great resource. The TV, Oprah, The View, they love doing stories about children with special needs. Recently, I think Oprah did an entire hour on autism. If you're not a big reader, it's possible to sit and get the information that way. On my TiVo at home, we have it set that anything that's going to show about autism, because one of my children has autism, gets recorded. So I never miss anything. And you get a lot of different perspectives and you learn a lot of things that you might not know. And you don't have to read, you don't have to even go out of your house. Lectures and workshops. Many organizations, community centers and Ys have workshops and seminars that they are giving, and it is so worthwhile to attend. You hear amazing people who have so much to offer and so much to give, and it really gives you a great education in how to help your child. Professionals, we don't want to count them out. There are some very helpful doctors and teachers and social workers and psychologists, and if you find a good one, they can give you wonderful advice and point you in directions of how to narrow down your search and where you should go. And the last, and I think the most important, is other parents. Most of what I've learned from other parents, and I've tried to teach other parents myself. The parent network is so strong, and parents are so dedicated and so motivated, and are often at the forefront of new treatment because we have the energy to research our child's condition, whereas the professional has so many kids, they really might not be as up to date as a parent. Okay. And how do you meet these parents? Well, support groups. There are support groups for all the different organizations for specific disabilities. There are community centers that have lots of after-school programs and support groups for parents. The special ed PTA is a really powerful resource. If your district has a special ed PTA, get involved with it. They have informational meetings. You'll meet other parents in your district. Often the special education professionals will go to the meetings, so you'll get to meet them. And it also lets you kind of know what the other kids in your district are getting from special education, so that when you go to your meeting, you kind of know what you're going to be offered. Churches and other social groups. Your pastor may know of other families in your church that have a child with special need, and he may not, or she may not be able to tell you that person's name or number, but you can request, can you give my number to this person? Would this person, if you know anybody, you feel free to give my name out so they can contact me. Or you can put up a flyer and say, anybody with child with special needs that you want to get together. This is a really powerful way of making a local connection for support. And once again, I said the internet is an amazing resource. They have these listservs. You can go to yahoogroups.com and you can sign up for a group about any disability, any group, any location. You can make your own group if you want. And it's totally parent-run, and it's free, and it's also a really powerful way of connecting. You can write a question on the internet, and you'll get answers from all across the country of people giving you advice. So that's also a wonderful resource. The things that parents provide, two things that are so important. The first is support and understanding. Unfortunately, many people without children with special needs really don't want to hear about all the details. When they say, how are your kids? They want the answer to be fine. They don't really want to know. Other parents with special needs are the people you can go and you can talk to about how your kid's running around the house all night when the medication runs off, or how your kid is banging his head on the floor and he's making you crazy. And only other parents who have to deal with the same stuff can really, really understand and support you, and in a way that is not pitying or feeling like they're putting you on a pedestal, or, oh, I couldn't do that. They're really your equals. They're really a club. It's a club you don't want to join, but once you're in it, the other club members are very helpful. And the second thing that parents do is let you know what's out there. A wonderful special ed karate program, a special class in a district, getting a behavior specialist or summer services. If they've done it, you know it's possible to get it. And the district might not tell you about it, but if you know that another parent got it, then you'll have the confidence to go to your district and say, well, I know that other parents got this, so why can't you give it to my kid? So that's, I think, the most valuable thing about networking. I think sometimes the way the system is set up is a one-way flow of information. From the professionals at the meeting, they sit you down and say, okay, we've examined your child, and we've done the reports, and this is what we think that your child's program should look like. This is the way it really is supposed to work, where the parents are coming in and saying, this is what we think our child needs. These are goals we would like for our child. These are concerns that we have. This is what it's like at home when we try to do homework. So it's a little bit longer to do an IEP meeting if it's a two-way street. And when you notice a district set up a half an hour for an IEP meeting, they really don't have this in mind because you can't do it in a half an hour. But this is really what you want. You want to be an equal and active participant and provide the district with your input. So, question is, how do you do that? Okay, the first step that's really important is that all requests should be in writing. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist legally. You could have many conversations about how your child can't read, but unless you write that letter requesting that evaluation, you might not get one. The minute that you write that letter starts a timeline the district has to follow. And all of a sudden, you'll get an evaluation. It's amazing. So it's so important that whenever, don't just talk. Write it down. Send a letter. Get copies of all your reports before your meeting. This is one thing that no district does. They're supposed to give you the reports, but oftentimes they don't get the reports till the night before, unfortunately. But they often hand you the reports at the meeting. You have to call your district and you have to say, you know, I'm having an IEP meeting, please send me the reports in advance. And if you don't understand what the report says, call up and say, I'd like to speak with the person who did the evaluation so they can explain to me what this report says. You don't want to go into that meeting not knowing what that's not the time to figure out what the report says. You want to walk into that meeting having already figured it out. And if you don't understand it, make sure that somebody from the district teaches you and explains it to you so that you know. You can talk to your kids' teachers and say, what are your concerns? What are things that are troubling you? Make sure that before that you go into that meeting, you kind of know what the problems are. The paper trail. You want to try your best to keep all correspondence and paperwork together in one place so that you can pull out last year's IEP at a moment's notice and say, but he hasn't met any of his goals. If you don't have that paper, you can't do that. If you send a letter to the district, keep a copy of it. When did you send it? Oh, well, I sent a letter 3 weeks ago, and here's the proof, here's the date, this is when you got it. Keep a record. If you're having a particular problem with the district and you're on the phone a lot, write it down when you spoke to the person, what you talk about, so that they can't say, oh, well, we never heard of this. You can say, well, here's my notebook, and I spoke to you 6 times. I spoke to this person and that person. You want to be able to have all your ducks in a row. You want to be so organized that you're more organized than they are. The second thing about testing that's important, not only getting the reports in advance, but making sure that they reflect your reality of your child. When you read a good report, you get a sense, hey, you know what, that's my kid. They're talking about my kid in that report. If it's a bad report, you're going to going, that doesn't sound like my kid. Sometimes a child's behavior just might be out of the ordinary during the testing, or sometimes they didn't do the right test and didn't pick up what was wrong, or sometimes they didn't spend enough time with your child to really get a full assessment. If they're saying, oh, your kid doesn't need speech therapy, but you can't understand a word that your child says, that's important information. If you don't think that the test is accurate, you have the right to request an independent evaluation or further testing from the district. So just because the test has a particular outcome doesn't mean that the test is accurate. It has to match what your child's really like. I'm not going to go over all of these, but I just wanted a list of different kinds of things to think about. What do you want on your child's IEP? Sometimes the districts will cover these things, and sometimes if you don't bring it up, it won't happen. Like homework accommodation. Homework is taking 3 hours a night. That should not be happening. You might have to do less homework every night. The district might not even think about putting a homework accommodation in there, unless you say, you know what, homework is unmanageable. Adaptive physical education. If your kid is really clumsy and hates gym and they can't play the games the same as the other kid, and they don't have the skills, you might say, you know what, I really want adaptive physical education. I really want my child to be taught the skills so that they can improve. If you don't bring it up, it probably won't happen. So all these different things are things you can think about before you get to the meeting that you might want to bring up. The next one. And I think that these were a couple examples that I said before. One of them is parent training for autism. If you have an autistic child, you're entitled to parent training to help you generalize to what's going on at home and school. If you don't ask for it, you might not get it. Even though the state says you're supposed to get it, you often have to tell the district, I want it. Before you go to the meeting, when they send you the letter, you get procedural safeguards. And it's a form. They're legally required to send this to you. Don't throw it away. It lists your rights. You should read it or have somebody explain it to you. On the back, it gives low-cost legal help. If you don't know what your rights are, the district can walk all over you. If you know what your rights are, then they are less likely to get away with stuff. When you first request services from the district, you're supposed to get a book that talks about services in New York State. This is also a really valuable overview. If you don't have one, if you lost it, ask for one. It gives you an entire overview of the entire special ed process. If you don't know what that process is, you can't participate in it. When you finally get to the meeting, you've done all this work, you know your kid, you've thought about what you want for your child. It's the day of the meeting. If you don't speak English as your first language and you want an interpreter, make sure that they know that. Make sure that you can have one. Bring somebody with you. You're walking into a room, there could be 5 or 6 or 11 people from the district sitting around that table. It's intimidating. You want to have somebody there to take notes or hold your hand or to help keep you calm, or just even to have, like, somebody at your side. You don't want to be sitting there by yourself. It's a very overwhelming process. If you don't understand something, if you don't understand an acronym or something that they say, stop and make sure they explain it to you. You need to understand everything that happens at that meeting. If you don't agree with something, speak up. Now, I said that a lot of times the districts are trying to push these meetings along really fast and get you out. They're not allowed to do that. You can take as much time as you need. If you don't understand something, stop the meeting and say, I need you to go over this, I don't understand it. And don't let the committee rush you. If they say, oh, well, we can't go on, people have to leave, or you have to leave, reschedule the meeting. You can have another meeting. You can have 6 meetings until you get everything hashed out. You don't have to get it all done in a half an hour. And have an open mind. Don't just walk in there saying, this is what I want and I can't change my mind. Maybe the district is right. Maybe they have a good suggestion. If you try it and it doesn't work, you can always have another meeting and revisit it. So it's always good to have an open mind and not be dogmatic, not come in there and say, it's my way or the highway. Next one.
That's the
What?
That's the next one.
Oh, there are 2. Okay. Make sure that the goals on the IEP are measurable. That means that you can tell if your child is doing better. If they say a goal is, Danny will be friendly with his peers, you can't measure that. If they say, Danny will say hello to 3 peers a day, 70% of the time, that you can measure. So make sure that the goals that they write it in such a way that you can find out if the child is actually successful or not. Make sure that the progress reports are built into the IEP. Multiple times during the year, usually with the report cards, there should be some sort of update, some sort of method of finding out whether or not your child is making progress on their goals. If you don't get any updates, how do you know if your child's making, you don't want to find out a year later, oh, your child made no progress. You want to know throughout the year. And focus on what's really important. You're not going to get every single thing that you want. But you have to focus on what is the most important thing. What are the things that my child needs the most? And you might have to give in on some other issues that you can live with, all right, speech twice a week instead of 3 times a week, maybe you can live with. But the most important things. If you just focus on those things, it lets the district know that you're serious and that you're not just like asking for everything. And stay calm. If you get hysterical and start using bad language or getting agitated, they're not going to take you seriously. They're going to put you in the crazy parent category. You want to be seen as an active member of the team, so you can be crazy and upset after. Well known. But while you're there, you have to hold it together. And if you find you're losing it, you know what? Say, you know what, I can't do this anymore, let's reschedule the meeting. Because you have to be able to think coherently. After the IEP meeting, you're going to get a written IEP. The stuff at the meeting, it's not written at the meeting, you'll get it after. You have to read it. It's a legal document. You want to make sure it says what you talked about in the meeting and that you agree. If you don't agree, don't sign it. Schedule another meeting. Once the IEP is put into place, the next year, call and make sure they're actually getting the services. Sometimes they don't have a provider. How are you going to know that your child is not getting speech therapy unless you call and say, so, when is my child getting speech therapy? Give them a few weeks in the beginning of the year to get everything set up, but then afterwards, if your child is not receiving a service, you need to call the district and say, well, why not? Find somebody at the school you can contact on a regular basis to get information. It can be the school psychologist or a child's guidance counselor, somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you can ask your questions to, and you can get to, where do I go, what do I do to get this fixed? So that you have a way of communicating with your child's school. Communicating, whether it's a communication notebook or a monthly team meeting or a weekly phone call, are so important in making sure that things don't get out of hand. Because what you don't want is, by the time they talk to you, things have gotten so bad that you're upset and they're upset, your child's upset. You want to fix things while there's still small problems. The only way to do that is to have open communication. And at the end, what if you can't agree? What if you can't work it out? Well, first you have to figure out whether or not it's really worth it. You know, is this worth the fight? If it isn't, you know, you might think, is it worth the stress? Is it worth getting agitated? Is it worth being antagonistic with my district? If it's a small thing, you might want to say, you know what, I'm willing to take the loss. If it's a big thing, you know, your kid's in a really inappropriate program and they're getting worse and you really can't give up. You really have to keep fighting. You can request what's called an impartial hearing or mediation. In both of those, you discuss with the district, and the mediation, I think, is a less formal. There's no judge. You and the district kind of try to work things out with the mediator. With an impartial hearing, it's a court case. On the rights list that you get in the back should be free or low-cost advocacy centers or legal services that you can get to help you, or you can go and represent yourself at the impartial hearing. The district doesn't want to have an impartial hearing. It costs them a lot of money to have an impartial hearing. They're going to try and work it out with you. If you're reasonable and you're right and you're legally right, if you know your rights and you know that you're legally entitled to something, most likely, even if the district doesn't want to do it, if you keep to your guns, they will eventually back down if they see that you're serious, because if they think they're going to lose at court, they'll probably, like, you know, bluff a lot, but then they'll back down in the end. And don't give up, because you really don't have anything to lose. At the end of the day, you're not going to be any worse than if you gave up, but you might actually succeed. Okay? And that's my talk, and I want to thank everybody for coming. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of participation, the people that participate at the IEP meeting,
Yeah?
I basically have three questions. Is
Mm-hmm.
everyone who writes a report,
Mm-hmm.
are all persons who write reports required to attend the meeting so that they can explain
Right?
/ defend their reports? Can you, as one of the persons that you bring with you, can you bring an attorney if you feel that there's a need to do so? And are children that are over a certain age, 14 for example, are they also entitled to be present at their own IEP meeting?
Okay, as for the first one, most of the time, specialists are supposed to be at the meetings. With the advent of conference calling, a lot of the times they will attempt to use a conference call to reach the specialist. I have to say, most of the time, you hear from most of the specialists. Sometimes they're not going to be there. If the report is okay with you, and you agree with the report, then fine. If you cannot reach the specialist and you don't agree with the report, then you have another meeting. I would say that if the specialist is school-based, they are in the school, you're more likely to have them show up. If they are a contracted employee of an agency that the school contracts, you're less likely to get them because they're all over the place and they're probably going to be a phone call, which sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. I've actually been at meetings where it's me and the psychologist in a room and everybody else is phoning in, which isn't ideal, but that's sort of how it works sometimes. Your second question is about an attorney. If you want to bring an attorney, you're entitled to do so. You have to inform the school district and then they bring their attorney. So it kind of bumps it up. I don't recommend doing that unless you already know going in that you're going to have a hard time, because that sets a whole new level. It becomes adversarial right away. You can always get an attorney later. In terms of, you can have a meeting, if you're not in agreement, you can then have another meeting and bring an attorney to that meeting. But I don't always think it's valuable to bring an attorney to the first meeting, because it kind of puts the district on edge and they're watching what they say, and sometimes you want them to screw up and say bad things that you can use against them. You can also ask if you can tape record the meeting.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Just give it
If you think you're going to have a controversial or problematic, if you know that the head of your committee tends to mouth off and say things that are inappropriate, say, you know what, I really have a hard time keeping track of everything. Please can I tape record it? And you know, that is also something that you can do. Or you can say, you know what, my husband can't be here. I want to tape record it so he can hear it at home. And
Is it your right to do that?
I think it is your right to tape record it. I think you have to let them know. You can't secretly record
Right.
them, but
No,
you can say, I would like to record it. You might have to tell them in advance. Maybe they'll bring their tape recorder to make sure that you're not cutting and pasting later and editing. But you're definitely entitled. And the third thing is about older children. Yes, and not only are they entitled to, but they are encouraged to attend meetings and advocate, usually by 13 or 14 years old. Any other questions?
Yeah, with the handout, where can I go to get those handouts?
These handouts, you can go to the school district. They should have them.
Or can they order them for someone?
They're supposed to have them. This is, I think so, this looks like it might be a photocopy. I don't know, it's just gray.
Can
But
I just make it so I can go back and inform them that they need to get this?
yeah, I mean, when you receive a letter stating you're having a meeting, it might not be exactly that, but the district is required to send out that small paper with the letter. The big paper, the booklet, I think you're only supposed to get that when you first approach special ed. So a lot of parents probably threw it out when their kid was 3 and then don't have it anymore. But I'm sure if you called the district and said, there's this book, I don't have it anymore from the state education department, can I get another one?
I don't know if I'm supposed to talk to this.
Go ahead.
You can go online to the State Office of Children and Family Services. They have a special website. On the side are forms and booklets and publications.
Oh, okay.
And I've ordered things off there. They have booklets regarding rights of parents with children and special ed, parents with foster children, parents who are adopting. All sorts of booklets are available through the State Department.
Oh, what she said is that there's a website where you can order the state education department. Do you know the website address? Or?
I went to Office of Children and Family Services.
Is it VESID?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, VESID is the state education. It's www.vesid.nysed.gov.
Oh, okay.
And it has a great deal of information and articles and policies that parents can access. Anybody else? Thank you very much for coming, and good luck.
Thank you.
The Touro Law Center's plow hits your car.